Testing one. Is it on? Lord, we ask you for your blessing upon council, direct and prosper its deliberations to thy advantage, to thy glory, and the true welfare of the people of whom we serve. Amen.
Amen.
Shire Council, I respectfully acknowledge traditional lands and waters of the Gunditjmara, Gungadij and Jarbajali people and their respective cultural heritages. I acknowledge the elders past and present here at today's gathering, and through them all Aboriginal people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people provide an important contribution to Australia's cultural heritage and identity. We respectfully acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait community living throughout the Glenelg Shire and the contribution they make to the Glenelg Shire's prosperity and well-being. Now, to those present in the gallery here today, by attending the public meeting of the Council, you're consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Council meetings may be live streamed and the CEO will enable a copy of the recording to the public. Now, receipt of apologies. There is one with Councillor Smith, who is unable to be here this evening. Now, councillors, before I proceed tonight, I just would like to address an incident that occurred at our last meeting. There was an accusation against me for drinking alcohol at a blue light event. At the time, I handed these questions over to the CEO in order to preserve the integrity of the process that needed to unfold and not to taint it. However, this is no longer possible. In January, there was an outdoor cinema event that my family attended. This one, like the previous ones, were touted as family events where the community is invited to come along and enjoy the night. Previous outdoor cinemas here and throughout the Glenelg Shire allowed alcohol at events to enjoy with family picnics. In fact, local wineries and beer clubs had stalls set up at these great family events. On the evening of the event, we checked the event site on Facebook before we left home, specifically the event details section, which is where one would assume the information would be. There was no mention of the blue light or freezer involvement in the event details section. Nothing to indicate that it was different from previous ones. So we attended the outdoor cinema, set up our picnic and cheese board and popped open a bottle of Prosecco to go with the cheese board. And whilst in that process, we noticed there was no winery set up and no stalls. So I approached, let me highlight that again. I approached one of the event staff to check if it was an alcohol-free event or not. They were unsure if it was, so went away and checked and came back informing us that it was. So upon receiving that information, we opened up our soft drinks, and we used our fancy glasses to drink the lemonade and water that was brought along with us for the night. At the end of the night, we proceeded to tip the bottle out. It is disappointing how this has played out, and all I can say is that when I was in a position, through no direct fault of my own, I showed leadership and character befitting of this position by actively seeking the correct information when I noticed something wasn't quite right and acted accordingly when I had the correct information. Over the past 4 weeks, every single person that I'd encountered that knew of this event made a light-hearted joke or scoffed at how this has become an issue. It became a topic of discussion. Now, spending time and ratepayers' money on this issue is why I need to apologise to this council and the public as well. So for that, I'm sorry. Thank you, councillors. Now we proceed with question time. 6.1, questions taken on notice at the previous meeting. Some questions there along with the answers as well. So I'd like to move to item 6.2, which is questions from the gallery, and there are a few, councillors, so bear with us. In fact, I'll need to take time as well. So the first questions we have are from Mr. Jowett. Matthew?
Yes.
Just bear with us for a second. We do have to have a microphone for the recording. We can certainly do that, yes.
Sorry, it's reflecting back on us too.
Good evening. My first question
With the considerably large change to the planning scheme, Amendment C96GLEG in this month's agenda, point 14.7, could you please tell me what are the implications for the Shire and the community?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Jowett. Obviously, it's there to correct a lot of anomalies. However, if you would like some more detailed information, I will throw over to Mr. Hole, who would probably give you a further summation of what you're after, really.
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. The C96 is a corrections amendment. Council staff have been aware and from time to time of issues associated with the planning scheme. A lot of these corrections we've got to deal with today is actually state land that's been zoned as public reserve that are now in private ownership, and the planning scheme needs to be changed to reflect that. We're also addressing some heritage matters where new information has come to light, giving clarity about the heritage status of particular properties or locations that also need to be corrected.
Thank you.
Mr. Hole. Second question, Matthew.
Can you please provide more detail about the major art storage project, its possible location and items stored there?
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. Yes, this is exciting. I can give you the short version. Obviously, we've got some climate control and appropriate storage of some artefacts, art pieces. But I will throw to Ms. Bennett, who will be able to give you a more detailed information.
Thank you, and through the chair.
It does work, yes.
Yep, beautiful. Thank you for the question, Mr. Jowett. So this major art storage project is about keeping our cultural collection safe for generations to come. So Council has a significant and diverse cultural collection of art and other items in its care. So Council received funding of approximately $150,000 to install a climate control facility and at the Portland Arts Centre. While that project is underway, our cultural collection items of significant value have been safely transported on a temporary basis to an off-site storage facility. So the project is due to be completed in July. And then once complete, our most valuable items in our cultural collection will be maintained at museum quality, there to be enjoyed for generations to come.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. And just add to that, there is literally millions of dollars worth of art that the council holds, whether it's been donated or it's handed down, that we are desperate for this funding for. So it's a fantastic project.
Absolutely. And final question, can you please provide a progress report on the 2023-24 draft budget?
Certainly. I will hand over to Mr. Hull with that, as we have been dealing with that in the last few meetings, so it's been fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors and finance team have been working through draft budget process for several months, even as late as earlier today. We're making final adjustments at the councillor workshop in a couple of weeks, and the draft budget is set to be released for community consultation at the April council meeting. We'll call for submissions over the period of May, and then it'll be listed for adoption at the June council meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Mr. Noski, where are we? Do you need a copy of your order?
Put it in context. In answers to the numerous questions and articles written about Council's decision last June to collect an extra $3.429 million in rate revenue under the guise of ending the primary production land rebate scheme, Mr. Mayor, you've repeatedly stated the extra revenue was required because Council does not have the cash reserves building up from past budgets that it needs to meet operational pressures. So last June, on the 28th of the month, Council voted to collect an extra $13.7 million from Glenelg Shire ratepayers over the next 4 years than they did the previous 4 years, presumably to build up the cash reserves you say Council requires. You may recall that I suggested to you in an email in July of last year that there were errors in the budget documents that, if you fixed them, would provide you with the outcomes you were wanting without having to take the extra revenue. And you said that you were not interested in meeting to undertake a line-by-line review of the budget because it had been prepared by competent staff and checked and rechecked both internally and externally. Can I suggest maybe you should have done that? It's a fact of record that on June 28th last year, Council voted to adopt a budget document which said that Council would start this financial year with 15.159 million in cash reserves, having paid off 565,000 in borrowings in financial year 2022. It's another fact of record that 2 days later, on June 30, when you signed off the set of accounts for 2022, you had repaid 7.565 million in borrowings in financial year 2022, and you still managed to start the year with 16.573 million in cash reserves, 1.414 million more than stated in the adopted budget papers. So in effect, you voted to take an extra 13.7 million in rate revenue over the next 4 years to build up cash reserves when you had a lazy 8.4 million sitting in the bank that was not disclosed in the budget papers. So my questions are, did councillors approve the unscheduled repayment of the extra $7 million from long-term borrowings before you adopted the budget on June 28, 2022? And if not, were councillors aware that staff were going to pay off an extra $7 million in borrowings sometimes in June of 2022?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Noski. Obviously, there's a lot of information there in your summarisation. What I will do is I'll take that on notice to go through it. Did you approve the repayment? If you let me finish my answer, that'd be fantastic. Thank you, sir. On the surface of it here, you're talking about $7 million of borrowings. Anytime the council needs to borrow money, they need to budget for it. So if that's not what you're assuming, because you're shaking your head, I will take that on notice.
You paid the $7 million off.
And I'll come back to you, sir. So thank you for your question. Next question.
You paid the $7 million off. You didn't borrow $7 million.
Mr. Noski,
your next question. You paid the 7 off. Do you understand that?
Mr. Noski, next question, sir.
Was the $7 extra million of borrowings paid off before or after June 28, 2022? They were paid off in June because your May finance report...
So your question is, was the $7 million paid off before or after...
June 28?
Yep. So obviously I don't have any of that information with me. You're under your word, but what I can do is I can pass to Mr. Hole.
I'm sure I
if you can
remember paying $7 million off.
If you're unable to act accordingly, sir, I'll have to ask you to sit down. Is that understood? Yes.
Third question?
So, sorry, your second question. I'm passing Mr. Hole, so if you do listen to me, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a couple of things to unpack in there, Mr. Noski. First of all, council can only borrow an amount if it's in the budget. That's the first thing under requirement under the Local Government Act. The other thing is that council has, we have a number of works that were carried forward. So instead of drawing down the loans and then incurring more, council was able to use funds for the particular projects. In this next year, for example, there's over $16 million worth of works that will be carried forward. So we did not need to draw down the loans.
You've missed the point completely with respect.
So again, Mr. Noski, we'll take that on notice. If you don't think that's the correct answer, what I'll do is I'll take that on notice so we can go through all that information, because obviously you've written over a page of information here.
It's $14 million out of being correct.
So,
and the third question is that you stated that council needed the extra rate revenue so council could build the cash reserves it needs. Given that your 2022 cash flow projections in the budget document were wrong by 8.4 million, so you had 8.4 million more at the end of 2022 than your budget document said you were going to have, might you accept that you didn't really need the 3.4 million a year extra?
Again, Mr. Noski, with all that information, I'll take that on notice, unless Mr. Hole is able to add anything to that. But I think Mr. Hole stated it fairly acutely that there's carry forward, sir, and we do need to budget if we are going to borrow. But if Mr. Hole would like to add any further on that.
And again, I guess it's similar to that. So, yes, where council will prepare the budget, we'll look at what our cash position is going to be at the end of each particular financial year. For example, at the end of this year that we're coming to in about 3 months' time, we forecast having a net cash of just under $5 million. But as I said, we're also carrying forward $16 million worth of works, and some of that has actually got commitments, and due to timeframes, it hasn't been paid. Mr. Noski, I can categorically say there is no cash reserves. Council has come out of years running in deficits, which obviously can't continue to go on, but there is no cash reserves outside of what we're predicting from the end of 30th of June.
Thank you for your questions, Mr Nosky. Now we have, is there a name? Mr Harvey.
Mr Mayor, in response to a question I asked at the last council meeting regarding your claim that the primary production rebate cost council $30 million over its lifetime, leaving the council financially unsustainable, you replied that the council went into deficit during the COVID years and that this year councillors aimed for a balanced result, a $60,000 surplus. I dispute your answer. True, the June 28 forecast for 21-22 in the adopted budget was a $58,000 deficit if you exclude capital grants and non-cash items. But just 2 days later, council signed off on accounts that showed a $5.45 million surplus for the same calculation. And the 2 COVID years before that, a total of $9.6 million in surpluses. Looking at this year, according to your February finance report, it seems that 22 and 23 will be far better than a balanced result. The end-of-year forecast is currently a $15.9 million surplus, which should translate into a result that's at least $3.5 million better than the budgeted $4.3 million surplus without capital grants and non-cash items muddying the result. You also stated in your response to my question that council does not have cash reserves building up from past budgets and is heavily reliant on rate income and government grants to meet operational pressures. If you look at the 4 budgets from 2019 to 2022, council started with $4.3 million in cash reserves. You budgeted to increase borrowings by $19.2 million while spending $64.4 million on capital works, ending up with $4.1 million in cash reserves. So you actually budgeted to generate $45.4 million in cash from operations. But your audited financial reports tell a better story again. Over the past 4 years, council started with $4.3 million in cash reserves. You actually reduced borrowings by $2.1 million, down to just $600,000 in total. You spent $58.1 million on capital works and you ended up with $16.6 million in cash reserves. So council actually generated $72.5 million in cash from operations over the 4 years, $27.1 million more in total, or $6.8 million per year more than budgeted. My first question is, in light of the outcomes I've just detailed, can you still say that council needed to take an extra $3.4 million revenue from ratepayers for this year and every year onwards?
Thank you for your question, Mr Harvey. Obviously going through a lot of information and I'll probably reiterate what Mr Hole mentioned before with regards to receiving those grants earlier, which obviously do muddy the waters, but you do mention about $3.4 million for ratepayers. We do have operating costs that we do need to meet. These operating costs are not stagnant, they do increase. And I'll take a great example with fuel. So all we can do is budget forward years for fuel costs. Now, as we saw recently with fuel, they doubled in prices, so this is not something small that happens. Now, that's just one instance where there's many instances over. So we do need to generate an operating capital, but I'll throw it over to Mr Hole again if you want to add anything further, Mr Hole, to that, or take that on notice, because obviously there's a lot of information in there that if you'd want a detailed answer, Mr Harvey, we need to look through.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Harvey, I'll reiterate some of the things that we had from the previous questions. The decision to move from a rebate to a differential rate has been communicated well and clearly. Council did need to address that particular issue, which they did. I understand it's not palatable to a lot of the area where they are actually paying more than what they did before. In order to the questions, we do have the funds that we do not have an excessive amount of cash reserves. We do have an excessive amount of works that are carried forward, which have commitments, which need to be considered in the financial picture. And council has not been drawing down on its loans in the last few years because of the cash reserve that it's got, so they don't incur the loan costs. So I'm pretty sure I can only really reiterate those same points again, but as I said, I'm more than happy to articulate that in a formal response back to you after the meeting. Thank you.
I guess my point is that every year the budget accounts for more expenditure than is actually taken. So therefore, it creates the impression that you need more rate income from ratepayers than you actually need.
Mr. Harvey, I understand you want to discuss that further, but what I will do, we'll take that on notice and give you an answer back. So I'll get you just to go to the second question, sir.
Yep, thank you. In answering other members of the Fair Go for Glenelg Ratepayers Group, you've stated emphatically that you trusted the staff to prepare the budget documents, that the budget documents are checked and double-checked, and that you're not interested in going through the budgets line by line with ratepayers. My second question is, can councillors please go through the last 4 years' accounts line by line with staff and then explain to ratepayers how and why your budgets have been $27.1 million wrong over those 4 years?
Okay, thank you for your question, Mr. Harvey. I think I can speak for most councillors that we're not chartered accountants. So we do leave the detailed information up to the experts in the council. That is why we hire these people. So a CFO, a CEO, that's why we have external audits as well to check this information. Now, I understand you're coming to a different conclusion or you believe differently, but all I can go off, sir, is the information that are given to us by professionals.
Percentage-wise, if my budgets were out that far, I'd be broke.
Do I still trust the people that are providing me information? Absolutely, 100%. That's what their job is to do. So your third question, sir?
Do you check them?
I've just given you the answer.
Given that a record 78 ratepayer submissions, that's a record 78 ratepayer submissions to last year's budget, failed to change even one line of the draft budget. Given that recent history suggests that the budgets are presented are consistently wrong, given the trauma that the pushback from ratepayers, horrified by last year's revenue increase, has caused council staff and councillors, and given the pain and suffering that this year's extra rate revenue collection has caused ratepayers, my third question is, will you commit to a meaningful budget consultation process whereby interested parties can sit down with councillors and staff and together end up with a better outcome for the Shire?
My answer would be certainly. We engage with the community to actually do that. That's what we want, Mr. Harvey, that's what we want to do. Now, I do note that you sort of say 78 ratepayer submissions regarding the budget. I believe there was one last year regarding the budget itself. There were 78 people, like you said, 78 submissions that were interested in how we raised that revenue, but not the actual budget itself. All councillors want to sit down when the budget goes out to discuss that with the community on how the money is spent to the community. So the answer is yes.
There were 12 of us in a meeting in the Civic Hall on top of that.
So my answer is yes,
and that might not be in your data there because I don't think you could change anything after. I think it was all for show when we turned up.
So thank you for that. My answer is, Mr. Harvey, yes, we do want to sit down. We will be asking for community input. So I'm hoping you'll be there.
Oh, yes, I'll be there.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Okay, Judy. Yep, she does want it back. Judy McDonald. Yeah. Where are we? Oh, there we go. So I was just reading the questions. You do need it back, so yes.
Thank you. Judy McDonald from Nelson. I was just wondering whether the council would write a support letter for the men's shed for the building application that's failed 2 or 3 times.
Thank you for your question, Judy. The men's shed in Nelson. Correct. Certainly on my radar. I was at the men's shed in Hayward where there was Nelson members there. I think the Nelson men's shed has about 27 active members. Is that correct? It might have an answer over here. 40s, even more. So that is one of the best supporting men's sheds.
Second, please. We now have a ladies' shed involved with the group.
Yep. So very much a part of the community that I want to make happen. Council will do everything within its power to actually support the men's shed. I think we can have every councillor agree on that. So it's certainly an emphatic yes.
Thank you. And my second question is, would the council consider spending some money on some Art Deco signs in the town and that would deter people pinching signs like the Isle of Bags.
Thank you for your question, Judy. We can certainly put that in the budgeting process when the budget does come out. I encourage you to certainly come along to some of the sessions Mr Harvey had mentioned to actually include that kind of thing in the budget. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Mr Punton.
My first question is, third time I'm going to have a go at this one. Now, I see in the minutes it was suggested that it was an unreasonable diversion of council resources to this question, and I'll ask again, because it's happened on 2 occasions. Again, the answer's been evasive and lacking transparency. Is the reason for not answering this question about numbers of employees in those individual roles, the reason for not answering this fairly simple request, simply that the inefficiency and the poor performance in these areas of Glenelg Shire will be exposed?
So, Mr Punton, I'll just cover you there, sir. Sorry, that's a bit defamatory. What I'd say is the question is, what is the reason for not answering the question regarding the job roles in the Glenelg Shire? So that's the question. I would say that it has been answered, but I will pass that over to the CEO if he does want to add anything to that.
Thanks, Mr Punton. It's not about hiding any numbers whatsoever. This is an issue about our own, I suppose, archaic HR system from an IT perspective to actually extract that information. When I came on board in May 2021, to actually just print a very clear org chart even for my directorate was not possible. We are investing a lot of money, and I know this, I suppose, communities ask questions about our expenditure in the IT space. It is to address an archaic HR suite of tools behind the scenes that is inadequate for me to be able to just simply go, generate a report and provide it. It's not about that. It's about I would actually have to task an admin staff member to go through manually to find you the 411 specific job titles. Can give a broad overview, which we've provided in the past. It's not about exposing any numbers. We are committed to our 286 or thereabouts in the budget as a full-time equivalent. In the report that was provided to you previously, it was about, give or take, 411 or thereabouts.
414.
Yeah, and that changes, and I think I explained at the last meeting, that actually changes sometimes weekly with temporary and casual staff, particularly those in our children's services and HAC area and our aged and disabilities services portfolios, because that's where the need is a lot for our temporary staff, and also quite a few temporary staff in some of our facilities teams as well. So there are ebbs and flows every week in relation to that. It's not about a lack of transparency, I can assure you. It's an inadequate HR system and reporting system that we have invested significant funds over the last few years. We are in the process of rolling out a new system, and I would hope in future I would be able to generate some reports that the community desire, but equally I desire as a CEO.
Yeah, and I think so for 5.1 million on the IT budget.
Yeah, that is a constant issue. It's, tonight on the agenda item you'll see the raft of reports in our Audit and Risk Committee. These are risks to the organisation that have been identified, and with our budget, and I know people talk in this community tonight about a surplus funds, I'm actually having to defer the rollout of some of those projects to meet the budget. So we don't have a huge cash reserve, I can assure you of that. There is a rollover of funds that Mr Hole has explained, and I think we need to just be mindful when a budget goes out. We're doing that at a point in time. When this draft budget comes out to this community at the end of April, if it all goes according to plan, I can tell you in the last week I've only had notification that 3 rounds of funding have now been extended to June 2024. So things change very dynamically and very quickly for us, and we just need to be mindful. It's not about a lack of transparency, I can assure you.
Okay.
Second question, Mr Punton.
Right, it's to do with road maintenance practices. Lately in the Glenelg Shire, it seems to be rather lacking in the quality control. There's been 2 resheet jobs, one in Gawler Street and one in Cape Nelson Road. They've been completed without repairing the depressions and damage before the resheet goes over. Now, if that doesn't smack of poor planning and substandard workmanship, I don't know what. Go and have a look yesterday when it was raining. There's puddles everywhere in that new resheet. The material you're using isn't adequate to hold the water away because it's a water-soluble emollient. So my question is that going to be monitored more closely to get a better result so that we're not doing these resheets all the time?
Thank you, Mr Punton. I can wholeheartedly say I think every councillor has asked similar questions. With regards to the quality of roads, not only from Vic roads, there's, they don't seem to be, anecdotally, they don't seem to be lasting as long. And, us councillors, we are members of the community as well, we do ask these questions. But what I can do is I'll pass to Mr Saunders, who can probably take those particular roads on notice and get back to you with some detailed information, but I'll leave that to Mr Saunders.
You have a fairly good, supposedly wondrous machine for filling potholes, which could be doing that sort of work, remedial work, before it happens. It's not.
Mr Saunders, I'll leave that comment up to you. So if you can provide some information on the 2 roads that Mr Punton has particularly addressed there. And you might need to say those roads again, Mr Punton.
Gawler Street and Cape Nelson Road, north of the Madeira Packet Road roundabout. Or south of, sorry.
Thank you for your question.
Yep.
Mr Punton, through the Mayor. Sorry, it threw me off when you said resheet. I use that terminology for gravel roads. Resealing, I'm assuming you're talking about. We actually employ a specialist contractor to come in and design the emollient content and the spread rate and all that specifically for those roads. In terms of its precondition, we do inspections on that, so I would have expected that most of the patching that needed to be done would have been done in any of the regulations. That being said, I'll get my team to go out and check those ones off because we haven't finalised that contract yet.
Right, on a rainy day?
Yes, and rainy days definitely show up.
Mr Mayor,
Yeah, I was going to say.
Move to extend question.
Nearly up to that time, yes. Second to Councillor Stevens, thank you. Your third question, Mr Punton.
And this is another one to do with roads.
Sorry, those in favour, Sarah. 7, thank you. Passed. Councillor Wilson, yes. Thank you. Sorry, Mr Punton. Third question.
Can the Glenelg Shire Council provide an explanation of the policy on roadside maintenance model they're applying to local roads, overhangs, grass verges, etc.? You must have a policy on that.
That would be
just interested to see it.
Fantastic question, Mr Punton. I'd say there is. Mr Saunders.
Thank you for your question again, Mr Punton. Through the Mayor, our road management plan, which you can access directly off our website, will actually detail any of the defects and the standard that we maintain to, including the repair time or the response time to any of those defects in those cycle inspections. So all the details on that, but I can email you a copy.
Yep. Okay, that'd be great.
I believe that was refreshed last year as well by the councillors. So. Hand it back. Yep. Barb.
Thank you.
Oh, I like this.
Thank you. First, let me thank the council for scheduling this meeting to Nelson. It's lovely for us to have you here on our home turf. Would the council please consider the proposition of holding a meeting with the residents of Nelson to discuss all things Nelson in the near future? We would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if I may be so rude, could you, Councillor Martin, come? Could you, Councillor Stevens, come? And could Councillor Smith please be asked? You three, and Anita, I'm sorry to leave the rest of you out.
I think we will all be there.
Yes, but you will know Nelson and we would appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Barb. I think all councillors will be very keen to go there, so I don't want to leave those councillors who weren't named out. I think that'll probably actually spur them on to be there, Barb, so that was a fantastic question. Listening posts. Yes, we do have listening posts. I think you'll find there's an agenda item coming up later on with a report in our first and second quarter of our council plan. There's actually a specific section in there about listening posts. So while it might not be a state government requirement, that's a requirement we put in ourselves to actually go out to the community and do it. Granted, COVID certainly didn't help us getting that done, but I can assure you we will be out there this year, so we'll be here.
Nelson be first off the rank.
There's been a request for Nelson to be first off the rank. I think we can probably accommodate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb. Christina? Christina, there we go.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Mayor, Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
I would like to just quickly apologise in advance that the question has not been formally formulated and it's in rather ignorant sort of form there.
That's okay, not a problem.
I came in the door not expecting that. I thought questions had to be put in like last Friday. So
right.
I apologise, and I'm not presenting it very formally. Without actually being in a position that I might be thought of pointing a finger at any particular developments that have been occurring in Nelson, I am wondering whether there are any anomalies and possible inconsistencies within the planning department which appear to be allowing now residents, for want of a better word, to actually be using sheds as accommodation. And in the past, it's been obviously very obvious or evident that one could not use their shed, or they could use it till their primary building was completed, and then they locked the door of the shed, and that was the end of it. And that also brings me to say, is the council perhaps now working on a case-by-case, that one can present a case, put towards the planning department, and it will be considered, and in which case, if that is happening, is that actually fair? And that also then brings in the fact that there are, as you all know in Nelson, very small building blocks. And it also brings to mind to me that how is the council, with their planning, accommodating for the fact that most of the people that have had to build in the past have been required to put in what I call the bells and whistle septic tanks, which are huge, and it possibly appears at the moment there might be people that are not being required to actually put in the bells and whistle tanks. That perhaps not.
I'll unpack that one a little bit. Obviously, sheds have come a long way, along with requirements for septic systems. So what I will actually do is pass over to Mr. Hole to give a bit more detailed information on that, but I'm pretty sure what I was going to say. There we go.
Thank you. There was a bit in that one, so I'll do my best to try and recount all these. In regards to anomalies with the planning scheme in Nelson, no, there is no anomaly. There is a certain set of requirements that must be met for habitation of a dwelling, whether that be a shed or other. So if there are matters that are of concern, I'd be happy to touch base with you otherwise, and I'm happy to follow that any enforcement that's actually required. But there certainly isn't any exceptions with Nelson. You did mention about septics, so there is one thing that has been different. Yes, Nelson has some unique characteristics in the lot sizes, and also the proximity to the river and even the soil type that make it difficult. Yes. There is the EPA introduced a new requirements for dealing with septics in 2021, I think it was, which we're in the process of implementing. It talks about land capability assessments. So there is a risk assessment process designed for the specific blocks of land, but in general it will be quite difficult in Nelson to actually get septics given the small size of land and what the land capability assessments will actually require. But again, if you've got some issues there that you want to raise with me after the meeting, I'm happy to look forward to. And I think there was one in the middle I may have missed. What was the second question?
I think they're the main two, I think.
Yeah, no, that, yes.
Okay. You do have a third. Oh, that's a septic system. That's a
and question. I didn't put a third one down.
That's
but
okay.
May I quickly ask, because particularly with concern with Barbara Walker,
yep.
In my years of earlier involvement in various associations in Nelson, there's always been an ongoing problem of communication. Karen Stevens would be well aware of this in the old days. I put forward a suggestion a number of years ago and for a community, if the Shire would provide us with a new community notice board. We've got one outside here that was provided by the Progress Association many years ago. Possibly as a result of that, it might have been followed up by, yes, Nelson was given a new signboard, but it's what's happening in the community, huge board that's popped up on the main highway, which is to attract attention to, for example, we're going to have an Easter fair, there's a Road to River festival. What I was after was, if there are still people, I'm even one of them, who don't necessarily rely on social media or going onto the internet. There are people in this town without a smartphone. So my solution to that was maybe through the VRC, or if we have someone who's savvy with their social media at the moment, to put the the notices that we might need to be very relevant and read are out here on the wall, and if nobody reads them and doesn't know what's happening, bad luck.
Thank you for your question, Christina. I think I'll summarise that. You'd like some better communication that may not be technologically reliant in Nelson. So we can certainly take that on notice and see if we can certainly accommodate that through the Information Centre. Not a problem. Mr. Headlam. Back there.
Mr. Mayor, this question relates to questions taken on notice at the Council's public meetings. Council states it is open, transparent and acts with integrity amongst other values it espouses. Why is the answer to the question taken on notice only provided to the questioner? Many people interested in council affairs travel long distances and spend a lot of time attending meetings and following council's decision making.
Thank you, Mr. Headlam. Obviously, while we do take it on notice, we may not have all the information in front of me, so obviously I do reserve that right. I will throw over to Mr. Hall with regards to questions taken on notice. A lot do get printed, but I'll let Mr. Hall answer that question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you'll see in the agenda tonight, Mr. Headlam, the questions that we're taking on notice at the last meeting, there's a summary provided, which is a public open document. We don't necessarily reprint the whole response. Some of these responses can be exceedingly long, so it's generally a summary, and some of them may contain personal information, but generally a summary is provided of any question that was taken on notice.
If I might just come back to that, I was thinking in particular of the question that Mr. Harvey asked at the last council meeting in Portland.
Yep.
And I'm sure that those of us, as you are probably aware, that are very interested in the rating issue, would dearly like to know what was provided in answer to that question. I don't see anything of privacy involved in that.
Your second question?
My second question is again about the rating discussion paper. Last month at the council meeting I asked a question related to the misleading draft differential rating discussion paper. You, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Hull's response indicated that there was only one unfortunate error. There are many misleading statements, including, and I quote, widespread misunderstanding regarding the concept of a rebate compared to a differential rate, and that many ratepayers were of the view that there was currently a differential rate in place. This has been created by council and in fact reinforced by council's own submission to the Victorian local government rating system. Council made a submission to that where, let me pick up my place again.
Using a different...
The rating and review on the 1st of November 2019, using the words, and I quote again, a form of differential rating, and another quote, a rebate, which is essentially a differential rating system. Why wasn't the change from the rebate to differential rating not done with a stroke of the pen, the same as it was changed when the rebate was introduced in 2010-11, and obviously without a council vote, because no record of that has been ever uncovered?
Thank you, Mr Headlam. Again, I think you've sort of partially hit the nail on the head. I wasn't around in 2010-11, so I don't know what information was given to the public. Obviously, there's different requirements now to what there were back then with regards to providing information to the public. And again, that's out of my control there. Now, to address, Mr Noski, if you're unable... If the gallery is not able to remain quiet, we'll actually have to ask you to leave, Mr Noski. Thank you. Sorry, Mr Headlam, I lost my place there. So, just going through your question again, what were you wanting the question to be, Mr Headlam?
Well, the question is, why did you complicate the issue of changing back from a rebate to a differential rate? This council was established by its commissioners with a differential rate.
Mm-hmm.
The council, Trevor Hornby, when he was on council staff, is the one who I believe changed to a rebate, and I can't see any reason why changing back couldn't have been done just as simply.
Yep.
And then all this other rate increase could have been justified separately, and the ratepayers in the Shire would have been a whole lot happier than going through this fiasco of justifying an increase in rates by juggling rebates and differentials.
Going back, so from what it was back in 2010, as I said, I don't know what was done there, what communication was done to the community there, so I can't answer that question here. Going between a rebate to a differential system, it's not straightforward, it's very complicated. As you've seen with all the documents set out, asking the average person who glances at that document to understand it, I could say there'd be no chance that they would be able to do that. We've spent the better part of 2 years understanding that system and going between the two and understanding it enough to actually to do it. So my question is, yes, it's very complicated. I can't help what's happened in the past. All I can do is go through what we've done now and move on into the future. And it was a requirement by the Local Government Act that if there is a rebate, there needs to be a reason for that rebate. There was not a substantial reason for the rebate, so we do need to change back to a differential. It is painful. It was painful. I can't deny that. But it's what was required, sir. So that's all I can say in regards to that.
Mr Mayor, I'm trying to establish why you think it was necessary to have all this other hullabaloo surrounding a simple change back to a differential.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Mr Headlam. It was not simple. So I'll move on to your third question. So Mr Hull would like to add... Sorry, Mr Headlam.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to add, we've even heard earlier today about council doing wide and thorough consultation. The idea of simply just changing back by a pen stroke, to me, would be completely less transparent than that. So I think council needs to open up and do the transparency of why such a significant change was required. And again, I understand that there are ratepayers that are still very unhappy with that process, but it was a lot of information produced. Yes, it was complex. It was very complex. We wish it was never probably put in place at the time, but there's very little people in here that were around when that was in or was available to the facts, and it wasn't Mr Hornby. I'd just like to clarify that at the time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hull. Third question, Mr Headlam?
No. My third question, no one has explained clearly why the council suddenly needed a 20% increase in its rate take from the ratepayers of the Glenelg Shire when the fair go rate cap was set at 1.75%. 3 years ago, I think it was, the council only needed 1% increase and the budget showed no need for any increase in rates, and suddenly you've come to 20%.
So thank you for your question.
What has happened?
Yep.
Could you please explain?
Yep. So thank you, Mr Headlam. Rate cap is different from changing from a rebate to a differential, for a start. So under the system from 2016, there's a rate cap from the state government, which is set from what we're allowed to go up to. Now, I think you mentioned there during, I think it was during COVID, I think it might have been the first year in council, the government said you can increase by 1%. This council chose to go zero, not increase it at all because of COVID. And I know you're saying here, or articulating here, that there was a 20% increase, but there was the council's, the rates it recovered was not increased by 20%. It was off the rebate that the state government mandated. And I understand that that's not what you're trying to articulate here, sir, but that's physically what's actually happened. So that would be my answer there, Mr. Hedlam, but thank you for your questions. And that's everyone there. No more questions? Portland Observer. Oh, Mr. Chalpett is here. Questions, Mr. No questions? Fantastic. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict of interest with item 14.9, community grants, recreation.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hawker.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest, 14.9 in the community grants, recreation.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest in a new line item 1410, related to community grants, a general interest around the arts, culture and heritage section. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. So just provide some clarity there. There was a need to separate item 14.9 into two sections, so we did have a quorum, so we will address that at the time. Confirmation of minutes as a recommendation there, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Hawker.
Mr. Mayor, I move the recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday, 28th of February 23, as circulated, be confirmed.
Seconder, Councillor Stevens.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Any opposed? All those in favour? 7-0. So moved. 6. Good point. Sorry. Yes. Good point. Presentations nil. Deputations nil. Notices of motion nil. Petitions nil for item 12. Move to item 13, councillors. The Audit and Risk Committee recommendation there on page 6. Councillor Carr.
Yeah. I'd like to move the recommendation that Council 1 receives the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 2nd of March 2023, and 2, notes the Audit and Risk Biannual Report for the period 1 July 2022 to the 31st of December 2022 in accordance with section 54(5)(b) of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Carr. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Audit and Risk Committee, look, for those that don't know, it's made up of 4 independent members from within the community. There's 3 councillors and we've got members of the executive team on that committee. We meet quarterly and its primary role is to monitor, review and advise council on matters of accountability and internal control affecting the operations of the council. It's a requirement under the Local Government Act. The last meeting we had was in March. Look, some of the things we looked at our audit strategy, our internal audit plans. We audited our asset and infrastructure management plans, and we looked at our cyber security action plan for the next 12 months, along with the regular reports around health and safety, financial controls, expenditure of the CEO and the councillors, and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
I think Councillor Carr has covered it successfully. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any further comments? All those in favour? So passed. 6-0. Move to page 9, councillors. Meeting report, management reports, I should say. There's a recommendation there. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the council approve the councillor and chief executive officer leave of absence register presented as a confidential circulation under section 35(1)(e)(4)(6) of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Of a seconder.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Councillor Wilson.
Procedural motion, Mr. Mayor. No, nothing to report.
Anything further?
No.
All good. All those in favour? 6-0, so passed. Item 14.2. Financial report. Councillors, a recommendation on page 11. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receives the financial report for the period ending February 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stevens. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, a quick update on the February year-to-date actuals. We're currently tracking well on a number of fronts. Particularly our cash flow is in a good position. I refer to the statement of capital works. We did budget for just under 11 million and we've got a forecast budget of 35 million. So there's been a big gain there, and we've had a big upswing in terms of those grants that have come in. So that increase mainly relates to infrastructure, $21.5 million increase there. We've got airport hangar improvement project of 630k. We've got 4.8 million for local freight roads. 2.5 million down at Portland North Precinct. We've got 12.5 million of carried forward projects. We've got 4.4 million at Alexander Park for a new pavilion there. $1 million for $1 million, for bridge and replacement works. 1.1 million out of Bridgewater Bay and another 5.3 million for local roads and infrastructure projects. So there's plenty going on in the grant space, and it's good to see all that additional grant money come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it is pleasing to see that the grant money coming in, but of course there's always, I don't wish to be negative when there's so much money in resheeting and infrastructure projects, but we do see tonight that we've had an increase of over $900,000 for plant and equipment due to increases, and this was due to delays in being able to get supply of heavy vehicles and a number of our light fleet, and that just gives an indication of some of the issues that we're having with being able to do the works that we can do. But look, really positive in the road resheeting. $665,000 is being spent there that we've got funding for as well. So there's pluses and minuses in every financial report. At the end of the day, it's heading towards where we need to be.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Hawker.
I'd just quickly like to thank the finance team for putting these reports together and for the work they continue to do.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Any further questions, councillors? Any opposed? All those in favour? So moved 6-0. Item 14.3, council meeting proposed date change. Council's recommendation, page 13.
Happy to move that, Mr Mayor, that Council reschedule its April Council meeting to Wednesday the 26th of April 2023 and undertakes public notification process to change of date for the April 2023 Council meeting.
Thank you.
Second motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Stevens.
I don't think it needs any discussion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Fair enough. Any comment further? All those in favour? So moved 6-0. Item 14.4. Council has a recommendation there on page 15. Councillor Rank.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation that Council revoke Schedule 29, the Dog Control Order Number 1 of the General Local Law 2018, which was resolved at the Council meeting on the 27th of February 2018. That Council make an order under Section 26 of the Domestic Animal Act 1994 and adopt the Schedule 29, Dog Control Order Number 2 of the General Local Law 2018, permitting dogs on leash along the newly developed Portland Foreshore Pathway and the Botanic Gardens, that the order made by the Council be published in the Government Gazette and in the Portland Observer. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Was there some minor amendments there?
With some minor amendments.
Thank you. Sorry. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hawker.
Second it.
Sorry, you might address this there, Councillor Rank.
Sorry, what did you say?
Jerry, would you like to speak to the Sorry,
okay. Thank you.
Been ahead of you there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the report actually demonstrates that we did quite a lot of work with regards to our DAMP, which is the Domestic Animal Management Plan. But during that process, we had some infrastructure that was built down there as part of some of the works that actually Councillor Carr described, which was in fact a walking path, and the walking path was in part of the area that was prohibited, and it just made a common sense approach that we allow people with their dogs to be able to walk along on leads through that park. It also gave us the opportunity to pick up on some other areas that, a common sense approach to walking your dog on a leash in those areas. As part of the schedule that we received, the information was, that we need to communicate to members of the community in order for them to manage their dogs effectively, and that is what the prohibited areas are and what the on-leash areas are. And I suggested that what we do is do some communication around that, because one of those areas that is a off-lead area is the very popular Nuns Beach in Portland. There's a restriction there at the moment that you can only that your dogs need to be that you can only have your dogs off lead between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. And that concludes on Easter Tuesday. So bearing in mind that that's not very far away, I think we need to do some comms around this to remind people and educate people around how they manage their dogs, because they are a wonderful part of our life. Thank you.
Oh, look, I've nothing to add to that. Councillor Rankin's done a stellar job in that. This is a common sense amendment, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Anyone else like to speak to Ms. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly support the motion, but also at this time I would like to highlight the thanks for the proper owners of dogs that pick up after the dog's mess on the public arenas, ovals, footpaths, in our CBDs. And there is a message to those that don't pick up, that think about others and start picking up after your dog's made a mess on the floor, because on the footpath, because it is a terrible state to have someone step in it and then walk into a shop or walk into their home on their carpet. So here's a plea to the dog owners. Please pick up and carry your bags.
Less landmines. Well said, Councillor Wilson. Councillors, any further to add on to that?
Stop it. I don't think I can add to that.
All those in favour of Councillor Wilson's addition?
Go for it.
So pass 6-0. 14.5, councillors, on page 17, there's a recommendation there. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I give great pleasure in moving that Council approve the grant application of $5,000 from the Heritage Grants and Loans Restoration Fund for the conservation works at 35 Percy Street, Portland, in accordance with the recommendations in Council's Heritage Advisor report and relevant permits.
And Councillor Rank to second that.
I am happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I must comment and commend the heritage architect that we employed in so much detail that's in this report. The building is an 1860 building in Portland. In 1919, it was taken over by the Portland Club, who still operate and manage that building. But prior to that, it was a wool store and other activities within it. The Portland Club, over the many years, has certainly maintained this building, and it is important for the weather to be kept out of buildings such as this, and the flashing and iron works that need to be done will protect the building for years to come. Now, I'm mindful that they can't just put zinc aluminum in; they've got to use the old galvanised iron for those buildings. So there is an extra added cost, and this is why this program is such a good program, the Heritage Grants program, for us to be able to assist owners to maintain their buildings. $5,000 isn't much in today's scheme of things, but it is better than nothing, and it is an encouragement for owners to, although this is in public hands, that it is an encouragement for them to do these works.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Rowe.
Just to add to the comments that Councillor Wilson made, I think the point here is that the application meets all the eligible requirements of the heritage support policy that we do have in place, and that everything. And as Councillor Wilson was alluding, that this is a very popular grant and one that's probably being exhaustive of its funds, but it was pleasing for us to receive ones that are for properties that are actually managed by volunteers, and I think that is why it was pleasing that we put this recommendation. And that's, it's not a lot, but probably to a volunteer organisation it is a lot of money, and we thank them for the works. And I think, yes, there's a duplication in the next one, but I'll let the councillors speak to that when it comes up. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any further comments? All good. All those in favour? So pass 6-0. 14.6, grant application there on page 19. Councillor Stevens, like a shot.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that Council approve a grant application of $5,000 from the Heritage Grants and Loans Restoration Fund for the conservation works at 16 Burke Street, Sanford, in accordance with the recommendation in Council's Heritage Advisory Report and relevant permits.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. We have a seconder.
Second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council received a Heritage Grant application for the Sanford Mechanic Hall Institute Incorporated Committee for repair work to their timber windows, their weatherboards and the door to the Foresters' Hall at 16 Burke Street, Sanford. The committee did request $10,000, but our limit at the moment is $5,000. The Foresters' Hall is on our heritage list, and it was built in 1874 and is individually listed as a heritage property and located on the reserve land of the Mechanics Institute, which was constructed in 1888. The building is of historical, social and architectural significance. And Mr Mayor and councillors, the windows are unsound, the weatherboards are dilapidated, as the Heritage Advisor has commented, and certainly the boost to this funding to rectify those items will boost the civic pride and certainly support this small voluntary committee.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Certainly adding to Councillor Stevens' comments, it is a significant building in Sanford that needs a bit of TLC, and it is pleasing to be able to vote to assist them with that. This council has a lot of heritage buildings within it. We are an old shire, and we as a council need to protect our old buildings, and this program, as I said before, is one that is put there to do that. Moving this motion and the previous motion brings that tally down to $2,000 for this financial year. So 3 years ago we had $100,000. So we're over 100,000, might have been 126, I think. So we've spent $124,000 on heritage buildings. That's a significant assistance for our heritage buildings in our community, and they're not just in Portland, as we see today. Sanford have a significant building, and they're in all their little locations. I'm hopeful that the council may see forward as to how this program will progress, seeing that the money has significantly dwindled.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any further comments? All those in favour? So pass 6-0. Sorry, Move to item 14.7. Councillors, on page 21, there's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
I'll move that Council submit Amendment C96 GELG as adopted to the Minister for Planning for approval pursuant to Section 31 of the Planning and Environmental Act of 1987.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Second, Mr.
Carr.
Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevens.
Mr. Mayor, this amendment to our planning scheme is basically really for administrative purposes. The planning scheme itself is a massive document, and we always come up with anomalies and errors as we go through the planning scheme. And our heritage advisor has picked up a number of these changes that need to be made. They're not significant changes, but they may be errors in the way something's described or what that location is given on the planning scheme or on a map. So this has gone through to the planning minister and it's been out for public consultation, and this motion tonight approves for council to send it to the minister for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Look, we did receive one submission, and I thank that person for their submission. There is 110 pages of information there, and it's good to be good to see these changes implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Anyone else? Councillors? No? All those in favour? Vote pass 6-0. Councillors, we move to item 14.8 on the agenda, page 23. There's a recommendation there. Councillor Rank.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation that Council endorses the Glenelg Shire Council Plan first and second quarter performance report for 2020-23 and approves the document for publication.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Is there a councillor second there? Councillor Stevens.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Rank.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is a report that we look forward to. This is one of the ways that we can communicate with residents across a whole range of our strategic priorities, our environment, education, employment, health and wellbeing, lifestyle, culture, access, transport and technology, our voice and our action. It provides us with an update on how projects are tracking, whether they're on time, whether they're behind, whether they're ahead of schedule. It also includes an update on our capital works, our priority projects, and even tourism events and things that are happening. So it is a great document, and that it will be publicised either on our website. You can get access to it, but I do encourage everybody. You people here are obviously very keen to know what's going on at council. This is a great way. It feeds into our annual plan, but it's a great way for us to report back to people on how we're tracking as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rank. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might just highlight a couple of things that are in the report of achievements that might interest people here tonight. Glenelg released its new Tourism Act for the Shire for the regional tourism as a destination, obviously featuring Great South West Walk, historical building, events and trails. The L2P, the Learner to Probationary Driver, celebrated 10 years of the program within our shire. Funding for 77,000 was released for funding to 34 community groups in our first round this financial year, and the Glenelg Library was voted number 1 in the state for visits and low-cost services. We finished the Narrawong Playground. That was a project that was officially open for the community recently, and stage 2 designs were completed for the construction at the Cape Bridgewater infrastructure. The tracks and trails, the Portland North Pathway Stage 1 construction was completed. The Trawler Wharf, the new amenity block was constructed, obviously completed on the trawler wharf, and the connecting path, the boardworks, the pump track were also completed on the Portland foreshore. And in Casterton, the lighting installation and the trees throughout Henty Street and the outdoor dining was part of a state government package. Just a few of the projects that were completed in this first quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillors? Anything else, Councillor Power? It's all good? Fair enough. All those in favour? So passed, 6-0. Move to item 14.9, community grants. Councillors, this is the sports section. Councillors Carr and Walker. So, Councillor Stevens, do you have a recommendation for
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, due to the late apology of Councillor Smith, it's been, we have decided to split this motion for the community grants into two, as we have a number of conflicts of interest with councillors. So first of all, I'd like to move that Council approves the allocation of funds within the community grant program round 2, 2022-23 for the sport and recreational category, please.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Rank to second that, I believe.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Look, Mr. Mayor, there's a number of fantastic projects in there, and they've all met the assessment criteria, which councillors have been briefed on. And look, I wish all of those community groups, all of those grassroots community groups and volunteers all the best with their funding projects.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Rank.
Without giving too much away, because we're not to do that.
Before,
But I did want to second this and have a bit of a chat, because I don't think I've been part of the community grants moving because of previous conflicts of interest. So I thank Council for splitting this, so I get the chance to talk about it as limited as I can. Just with regards to the recreation category, there was 21 applications out of 48, and it does make up half of the allocation. So it is a big section or category of the grants program, and that's because there are numerous sport recreation clubs across the Shire. And when we have a look at the list, which will be released after this meeting, and we'll be able to make the handover at a presentation, we can say that those organisations are all across the Shire. So that's great to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rick. No further comments? No. All those in favour? So passed 4-0. Bring the other councillors in, please. Now, councillors, there will be an item 14.10, which covers the rest of the grant categories. Councillor Rank has declared a conflict in that.
Ooh. There's some security lights out here.
Put a grant in for that one. So, councillors, is there a recommendation to cover the other grant categories?
I'm just waiting for Chrissy to
Sarah.
sit down.
Way to go. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move that Council approve the allocation of funds for the Community Grants Program Round 2, 2022-23 for the public halls, community events, the arts and culture and heritage and community strengthening categories for Round 2 of the assessment recommendations. And number 2, invite and contact all successful applicants for Round 2 of 2022-23 to a presentation night.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Just bear with me,
Second the motion.
You second the motion. Rachel, you got that? All good. Councillor Stevens.
Without me giving anything away, Mr Mayor, of who the applicants are. Look, obviously, they've all met the criteria, being grassroots community organisations within the Glenelg Shire. We have 5 public halls, then 5 events that will receive funding, and 5 arts, cultural and heritage applications that will also receive funding, and there's 12 applications in community strengthening. So lots of funding. I think the most important thing, Mr Mayor and councillors, is a total of $82,285 has been allocated for this second round of funding for this financial year to community groups across our shire. So look, congratulations to each one of those community groups that have put in an application. And look, I sincerely thank those voluntary groups for all the work that they do. And I know that their projects, the fact that they can achieve these projects with the support of council is, you know, invaluable and builds an enormous amount of capacity within our communities. So thank you, councillors, for supporting this program, and thank you to our community groups for having a go.
Councillor Wilson, anything further you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In following on from Councillor Stevens, I think she's covered a fair amount of it, but one thing is that it covers the whole shire. We as a council encourage every group in our shire to make application for these grants, and these grants significantly add to the maintenance of halls and to upgrade equipment for sporting groups, as well as equipment for other communities and committees that would otherwise struggle to get funding for it. So it's once again, this is with the heritage grants, one of the great programs this council has continued to provide our community, and I echo Councillor Stevens' words with thanking our volunteers, not only those that are a part of this, but all our volunteers across our great shire.
Also, Councillor Wilson. Councillors, any further comment? Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't often get to be here for the allocation of the community grants, but just take the opportunity to thank all those volunteers within our community who put in the hard work week in, week out within their clubs, and to run these events and put these things in place for our community. Look, they do estimate we're going to give out close to 82,000, and the estimated value is 178,000. Look, that's just the project value. You add up the 5 events who will receive funding. The economic value those events bring to our centres, such as Nelson, Casterton, Portland, Hayward, you know, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So these small contributions from this council to help those volunteers get those events off the ground is a great outcome, and it's one of the best parts of being on council, is being able to give out this money to those hard-working volunteers, because they always double it, they always triple it, and they sometimes times it by 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hawker.
Well done.
I'll just quickly add, we obviously had a comment from the audience today about some art projects. I think a community grant might be a great way to go. So they're brought out twice a year, so I encourage everyone from the community, from community organisations, to please apply for each round. So councillors, all those in favour? So passed.
Get Anita.
Get Anita. So just to give a bit of background why we had to split this tonight to 2 parts, was we had too many councillors sitting out. We need a minimum of 4 people, and if we don't, we can't vote on the issues. So that's why we had to split some categories. So we had appropriate and other people, because any time an issue is discussed where there's a conflict, councillors must leave the room, not only here but in meetings as well.
Okay, keep going.
Councillor Rank. Thank you, councillors. Move into item 15, confidential reports. Neil, any urgent business?
Yes, Mr Mayor, and my apologies for not bringing it forward earlier, because I only just heard it through question time. I wish to formalise the request that was made by the Nelson community and lobby for the men's shed. So I move that the men's shed issue be a matter for urgent business.
Happy to second that,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Mayor.
Councillor Stevens. Can certainly put that as a motion. Well, process regarding that.
Okay, so we need to agree that it's going to be discussed as urgent business, so put that to the motion.
Discuss it. Do we agree, councillors, discuss urgent business?
Yep.
Favour? 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the council lobby the state government on behalf of the Nelson community and members for a Nelson men's shed.
Councillor Stevens and women.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, this is always difficult when it gets thrown at us. Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, if my learned colleague could accept an amendment to that. I'm already working with the Nelson Men's Shed, and the state government provides $80,000 funding per men's shed through the state government. So I think that what we could do perhaps is amend it to a letter of support to their funding application and any support that we may be able to give them.
Councillor Wilson, would you like to amend?
I'm happy to amend to accommodate that. I think it's best to formalise it through a council meeting. And my apologies for my excitement and eagerness to see whether they've started building it or not.
I'm happy to.
But yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If that's
So,
okay.
Rachel, have we got that recommendation? Thank you. And councillors happen to second that amendment?
I'm happy to second the amendment.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Wilson?
Well, Mr. Mayor, we did hear what the community spoke about. They've got a number of 40, I think the number was, a very strong community, and it's a small community. And for this connection, that would be fantastic for them to be able to connect in their own location. I've seen the Hayward men's shed grow quite extremely well, and the work that they do in the community is phenomenal. The Portland men's shed, another one where that has grown, and the amount of work that they put in their community. So I fully support the men's shed program, and I'm hoping and wish the Nelson community well for getting theirs up.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Caston has a men's shed as well, and it's very good for the mental health of men throughout our community. Mr. Mayor, I met with the Nelson Men's Shed recently, and they've done a power of work working with what was DWELP, which is now DECA, the state government department. They currently meet in the CFA shed here in Nelson, and they've got approval under licence with DECA to some land which is adjacent to the CFA shed, and they're working through, and they've actually applied for building permits and planning permits. And as we know, Nelson has a very high a bushfire management overlay, and they had to do a plan, which I know one of their community members has done for them, and they've been successful in getting that through. Each year in May, the state government do open up funding applications for Men's Shed, so they're now in line and ready to put that application in. So a letter of support from council and having that backing would be really beneficial to their application, and any support perhaps we could give them with their application if so they need. I know that the Nelson Men's Shed has now branched out into a women's shed, so they're expanding again. And when we call Nelson a small community, well, I'm not quite sure. 40 men in the men's shed and a women's shed as well. So congratulations to them, and I wholeheartedly support anything that this council can do to support these groups, and particularly men's sheds and women's shed, for the advantage of the mental health you know, that it provides for people just coming together in a common goal and just having a chat and just having somewhere to go, particularly in these isolated communities, was certainly valuable throughout COVID and certainly continues to be valuable to this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Yeah. Councillors, anything further you'd like to add? I think everyone's going to support this, but we'll formalise it. All those in favour? So passed 7-0. Thank you, councillors.
6-0.
6-0. I think Jayden, if he was here, he would be supporting it as well.
Closure.
Thank you, Company. Urgent business closure of council meeting.
I just got, now that we've closed the meeting, it's not an urgent item, but it is an important item. I'd just like to acknowledge the contribution of Ms Bennett, who I understand it's her last meeting tonight with council. She's moving back to Melbourne, and I'd like to thank her for her contribution, because she's been a great, carried out a number of roles in our organisation over many years, and you'll be sadly lost, but we hope we'll be in touch. But I'd like to make that acknowledgement of your contribution. Thank you, Ms Bennett.
Jude.